very good Wednesday afternoon to you, and I hope I find you very well. Very busy few days, hence why I've not been around. I hope I find you very well today. Weather here in Manchester, dreadful, awful, autumn, winter, whatever it is, dreadful. Anyway, what I want to talk about today is really a question that I've kind of thought about, which is a quite an important one where our hobby is concerned, which is why certain brands of watches, certain watchmakers have faded into obscurity in favour of what we all consider now as being the masters of watchmaking in Switzerland. Now, when watchmaking first started, of course, it wasn't really Switzerland that were the big boys in the game at all. It was France and, believe it or not, good old England. England had a massive watch designing and watchmaking history, which was very rich in diversity and design and different ways of actually making watches and clocks that were more accurate as time was going on, and manufacturing enabled them to do that in certain different ways that wasn't available to them before. What I want to talk about today is a watchmaker that really should be far more famous than he actually is. Now, this particular watchmaker was born in my local market town, Ashton-under-Lyne in Lancashire. And he was born there in 1749. Now, this gentleman's name, if you may or may have not have heard of him, is a gentleman called Thomas Earnshaw. Now, Thomas Earnshaw watches are actually still around, but they are now one of these marketed brands, like a Jamaican brand, where a company has bought the name. They buy Chinese movements and stick them in a case in Germany and sell them at kind of inflated prices with some nonsense history, which doesn't really mean anything at all. But the name itself should be far more important to us as watch collectors than it actually is. So what I thought I would do today is give you a little bit of background into Thomas Earnshaw, who he is, and why he should be that important. And hopefully this will kind of generate a little bit of interest, and you get back in touch with me about this, and whether you know of anyone who was a pioneer in the watchmaking world who has faded away into obscurity. So, as I say, Thomas Earnshaw, born in my local market town, Ashton-under-Lyne, in 1749. He is, by those in the know, is still revered as a pioneer in watchmaking. He specialised in marine chronometers. Now, obviously, in his day, which was sort of the 18th century, Britain had a massive naval and merchant naval fleets from all major ports around the UK, sailing to all ports around the world, and obviously to enable them to navigate using charts, they not only needed to know the layout of depths of sea and sea lanes and currents and that kind of thing, they obviously all needed to know times, exact times. So it used to be very, very difficult to actually monitor how fast they were travelling unless they had a reliable timepiece. And this is where marine chronometers became so important. And Thomas Earnshaw became very famous for making the best marine chronometers out there. And he was commissioned by the Admiralty to supply marine chronometers to quite a lot of the famous Royal Naval vessels that went out during battles and things like that during the 18th century. His crowning achievement was the chronometer number 506, which was designed and carried aboard a very famous ship, the HMS Beagle, which carried Charles Darwin during his expedition to find animals and new species whilst he was writing Origin of the Species, his famous book. He also designed timepieces that were used at the Greenwich Observatory, because obviously observation of the stars and the planets all coincide with what we now call space-time, and the Greenwich Observatory is obviously the main centre where the Greenwich Mean Time is set, and all the world time now is set around GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, and his timepieces were part of a competition to find a potential of having 6 different timepieces, and from those 6 different timepieces, his was chosen as being the most accurate over a set period of time that they could use to ensure that they are the centre of time measurement, not only here in Britain where we use GMT and British Summer Time, of course, but GMT is measured around the world, and in military terms, of course, GMT is known as Zulu time. One thing that you might find interesting is we've all heard of the mutiny on the Bounty. Well, Captain Bligh, the captain of the Bounty, who was mutinied by his crew, requested that a timepiece was commissioned for him by Thomas Earnshaw at the massive cost of 40 guineas. Now, you bear in mind what a guinea is. If you don't know what a guinea is, a guinea is known or used to be known in business here as being the currency in which, or the level of currency which gentlemen do business. Normal people do business in what used to be pounds, shilling and pence. Gentlemen always used to do business in guineas, which was £1 and 1 shilling. So he commissioned a timepiece. Once that commission was approved by Captain Bligh, he bought it for 40 guineas, and that was a massive amount of money back in the 18th century, and Captain Bligh carried that with him on all his journeys, on all his voyages, and even probably had it with him when the mutiny of the Bounty occurred. Thomas Earnshaw was very, very famous all the way through his life, up until he died in 1829. And by that time, he had established a thriving business in London. He was doing a lot of work, not only for the Admiralty, but also for the Army, and also private individuals, wealthy private individuals, who commissioned timepieces for them. Because, of course, at that point in time, it was only the wealthy individuals that could afford an actual timepiece, whether it be a pocket watch or a clock for their glorious homes that they would have at that point in time, whereas normal people only knew the time by the time that was displayed on their local church steeple, of course. As I say, he died in 1829, and ever since then, up until recent times, Thomas Earnshaw, his reputation has got less and less and less, which I find quite sad, because it's his work and his expertise that allowed development of watchmaking and movements and different escapements that are currently being used and being improved on by the Swiss. Nothing would be available to us as Swiss-made quality timepieces had it not been for the work of Thomas Earnshaw. On a building which is 119 High Holborn in London is a blue plaque. Now, if you live in Britain, you'll probably be aware of these blue plaques. They are circular blue, and they are placed on significant buildings, and they give general information about the person, the date they were born, the date they died, and what they did. If you're outside the UK, I don't know whether you have this kind of thing in your country, but what I will try to do, I will pop a picture of the blue plaque at the end of the video so you can have a look, and that commemorates the life of Thomas Earnshaw. So, summing up, Thomas Earnshaw, I think, was one of the driving forces in not only chronometer development, but also general timepieces which you and I now benefit from. If it hadn't been for Thomas Earnshaw, we wouldn't have some of these great little machines that we wear on our wrists every day of the week. So Thomas Earnshaw, one of the pioneers in watchmaking. I am sure there are many, many more out there, maybe certainly some of the unknown French watchmakers whose name has disappeared in the mists of time. And if you know of any, by all means drop the details down below. It will be of interest not only for me to read it, but I'm sure everybody else. If you have any information about any other what were very famous timepiece manufacturers, designers, make a video. Let us all see what information you have for us to share. So now that's it for this one. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you found it of interest. Haven't checked my numbers yet today. I will do, and I've not got in touch with anybody. I will do in the relatively near future. So for now, that's it. If you're liking what you've seen, give it a thumbs up. And if you find it interesting, please subscribe. I think it's down here somewhere, or it might be down here somewhere. Press that little button and subscribe. So for now, that's it. Bye-bye.